She stepped onto the platform with nothing but a worn suitcase in hand and a heart full of questions. The early morning chill bit through her thin coat, but she barely noticed. Her world had collapsed over the last few weeks, and nothing seemed real anymore. The station was quiet save for the distant rumble of a departing train and the hollow echo of her own footsteps. She looked up at the departure board. Her ticket to Philadelphia blinked back at her, mocking in its promise of escape. She had left her apartment 3 days ago. 2 weeks earlier, she had found the papers on the kitchen table, divorce papers with his signature already inked in. The home they had built together felt alien now, as though her memories were echoes in someone else's life. The walls that once held laughter now held only silence. She had packed a single suitcase, enough clothes for a week, her favorite novel, a small framed photograph of her mother. The rest she left behind. Furniture sold or donated, keepsakes given away. The life she had known dissolved. She drew in a shaky breath, willing herself not to crumble. A train whistle sounded, and she flinched. She scanned the platform for a place to sit, but every bench was empty. She set her suitcase down and wrapped her arms around her middle, trying to steady herself. A shiver ran through her and she closed her eyes, picturing the moment she realized she had no home to come back to. The flash of his eyes, cold and resolute, the slip of papers onto the table. The click of the door as he left without a word. She would have stayed if he had asked her to. But he said nothing. He turned his back and walked away from everything they had shared. She supposed she should have expected it. 12 years of marriage had carried them through triumphs and hardships, but cracks had formed in the foundation. Between busy schedules, missed anniversaries, half-forgotten promises, their marriage had quietly unraveled. When she discovered his betrayal, the cracks yawned into chasms. Love had become dust. Her ticket predicted a 2-hour journey. Enough. Time to let the world outside blur into streaks of gray and green. She planned to leave behind Cleveland forever. Philadelphia meant fresh starts, new opportunities. She had a cousin there, a job possibility, a place to crash until she found her footing. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe. A voice startled, her soft, hesitant, carrying the weight of something important. She opened her eyes. A man stood behind her, dressed in a navy coat, hands dipped into pockets. He was tall, with dark hair falling over his forehead. He looked uncertain, as though he was struggling with whether to speak. "You sure you're on the right train?" he asked, voice low and gentle. She blinked, surprised. She straightened and looked at him. "Yes," she said, voice taut. "I'm on the 6:45 to Philadelphia." He glanced at the departure board over her shoulder. "That's right," he said. He hesitated. "First time traveling alone?" She stared at him, startled by the intimacy of the question. Normally she would have snapped back, but something in his tone softened her defenses. "No," she lied. "I've taken trains before." He smiled, small and understanding. "You look like you're carrying more than just that suitcase." She snorted softly, more bitter than she intended. "Who doesn't?" He studied her face for a moment. "Mind if I sit?" He gestured to the bench. She shrugged and gestured back. He sat 2 feet away, leaving room between them. They both stared out at the tracks, silence stretching. "Where are you coming from?" he asked after a beat. "Cleveland," she said. "And Philadelphia, huh?" She nodded. "Starting over." He considered this. "I moved to Chicago once to start over," he said. "Left everything behind. Didn't even tell my family where I was going until I arrived." She turned to him, surprised. "Why Chicago?" Shrugged. "It was random. I saw a billboard on the highway advertising a jazz festival. Next thing I knew, I pulled off at the exit and drove straight in." She smiled faintly. "That's not random. That's brave." He laughed quietly. "Maybe. Reckless. But sometimes you need recklessness to change things." She felt something stir inside her. A tiny spark of hope. She shifted on the bench. "What brought you to Cleveland?" He glanced at her. "Work, mostly. I'm an acoustic engineer for a firm that restores old theaters. We were rebuilding the State Theater downtown." She nodded. "That sounds interesting." He smiled. It is. I get to work on old stage floors, soundboards, even organ pipes sometimes. There's something magical about bringing these rooms back to life. She stared at him, curious despite herself. Do you miss your family? His laughter faded. Every day. But we have video calls. She considered that. Her hands drummed on her suitcase handle. She realized she had been holding it too tightly. Her knuckles tingled. She looked at her reflection in the polished metal pole beside her. No trace of the woman she had been a month ago. Strong posture gone, shoulders slumped, eyes dull. She wrapped her arms around herself again. The man watched her as though he understood. If you don't mind me saying, he said quietly, it seems like you could use someone to talk to. She closed her eyes, tears prickling the corners. She wanted to run away, but suddenly she was too tired. She exhaled. I just got divorced, she whispered. He nodded. I'm sorry. She opened her eyes and turned to face him. It wasn't entirely a surprise we'd drifted apart, but when I found out he'd been planning this for months, he never even looked at me once after I sat down. Just set the papers down and walked away. His gaze softened. That's brutal. It felt like a betrayal by lightning, she said, struck out of nowhere. He said nothing, only listened as she leaned forward. She paused, unsure if she should speak more. But the warmth of his empathy gave her courage. She drew in a breath and spoke, words tumbling out. I don't know what to do. I feel lost. Everything I built with him is gone. Our house, our plans, the life we talked about every night before bed. I have a cousin in Philadelphia who said I could stay with her, but I don't even know if it's the right move. I'm afraid this is just running. He considered this. Sometimes running is the first step to finding what you really want. She nodded slowly. I guess. They sat in silence as the platform filled with passengers babbling into phones, families waving, goodbye business people rushing. She watched a child chase pigeons near the tracks, mindlessly carefree. She imagined picking up that child and telling him everything would be okay. The man checked his watch. The train should be here any minute. She looked down at her suitcase. I'm not sure I can face him. You don't have to, he said. He said his piece, you don't owe him anything more. She swallowed hard. The words sank in. She realized she had been haunted by the idea of confrontation, of clawing back what she lost. But maybe it was time to accept that some doors remain closed. She lifted her head. Thank you. He nodded. You're welcome. A rumble grew, in the distance. The train's headlight crept into view. She stood, picking up her suitcase. The man stood as well, almost as though he was going to board with her. She looked at her ticket one last time. She turned to him. Will you tell me something? Sure. What's the best advice you ever got? He thought a moment. My grandmother once told me, life is a series of chapters. Sometimes, you have to close one to open another. Celebrate what was beautiful and let go of what wasn't meant to stay. She closed her eyes, letting the words echo. She imagined her grandmother, a small woman with twinkling eyes, sitting on a porch with her. The memory brought warmth to her chest. She opened her eyes and looked at the man. I like that, she said. He grinned. It helped me a lot. The train screeched to a halt. Doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Passengers surged aboard. She stepped forward, suitcase rolling behind her. She paused at the open door, looking back at him. Are you going to be okay? He asked. She smiled, small and genuine. I think so. Thanks to you. He bowed his head in a quick nod. She climbed inside and turned. Finding a seat by the window, she settled in, leaning her head against the glass. The man stood on the platform as the train pulled away. She watched him grow smaller until he disappeared into the blur of the station. As the train gained speed, the city skyline melted into fields and small towns. She stared out at the passing landscape, rolling hills, windmills turning lazily, clusters of wildflowers dotting the roadside. The world felt fresh, alive with possibility. She took out her phone and stared at his contact, name, which she hadn't saved. She typed a note in the memo app instead, jotting down his grandmother's words and his kindness. Maybe one day she would pass that advice on. The sun climbed higher in the sky, rays of gold dancing across her face. She closed her eyes and let the warmth soak in. She felt the tension in her chest ease. Her voice came soft and certain as she whispered to herself, "It's time." She would start over. She would close the chapter of betrayal and open a new one filled with hope. The suitcase beside her carried her essentials, but her heart now carried something more, the knowledge that kindness can arrive when least expected, and sometimes a stranger's words can save you. She reached into her suitcase and pulled out the photograph of her mother. She held it to her heart, feeling a well of love and strength. She pressed a fingertip to her lips and said, "Thank you, Mom." The train whisked her onward, toward Philadelphia and beyond. The future stretched out before her, wide and unfurling, like a scroll. She did not know what lay ahead, new friends, new challenges, perhaps new love, but she felt ready. She closed her eyes once more, a gentle smile on her lips, and embraced the journey that lay before her.